It's finally here, the end of Arc 5. It's been almost a 3-month journey, at least in terms of videos, as I finished the arc actually a few weeks ago in my Discord and on stream. Thank you all for coming out to that, by the way, it was a lot of fun. I get asked this question pretty much every day. Will you read Arc 6? And I thought I would finally answer in a video. Yes. At the time of writing the script, I have already read one chapter of it, so if you want to see my thoughts before I turn them all into a coherent video, make sure you join my Discord server down below in the description, and let's get into the final phase of Arc 5. The phase hits an absolutely explosive start with Al vs Capella, and the following chapter being Garfield vs Kurgan. These two chapters were not only unbelievably thought-provoking, but also just fantastic chapters. We kick it off immediately with Al vs Capella, and we get some amazingly interesting dialogue from Al. He demonstrates qualities not dissimilar to Subaru, somehow finding a way to reference erotic topics, but also holding a very similar obsessive type of love that Subaru has or had towards Amelia. He also says he understands Capella's attack patterns, and the language he uses in the fight leads me to believe that this dude is a looper. Much like Subaru, he has some form of return by death, and it also leads me to believe that everyone brought in from another world could have the potential to loop or have some extraordinary power. Where Subaru and Al differ, however, is that Al remarks that he might die for real given the right circumstances. Al's language also references focusing on a single solitary goal, a very similar rhetoric to that of Roswaal. Perhaps Al is a Subaru who did give up on being a hero. This part is a stretch, but I do wonder if Al and Roswaal happen to share a history. Al, or Aldebaran, is named after the star dubbed the Follower for following Pleiades, or Subaru. What if Al and Subaru ended up sharing a Looper Bro-esque relationship? Depending on the mechanics of getting isekai'd, perhaps other isekai people can speak freely of stuff like RBD. If it all boils down to the Witch of Envy, this chapter gives you a lot to think about. Al is just kind of a fascinating character. Getting into Garfield's chapter, this was so great. I'm hoping that the anime can do this fight justice. Garfield's inner monologue pretty much explicitly states everything I said in the previous video, but also flips it on its head. Leaving the sanctuary, he faced weakness, sure, but at the same time, he also got to face his strength and grow to new heights. Garfield, after facing L after L, is finally being seen as the warrior he truly is, and he finally gets a crowd to cheer him on. Kurgan only says one word throughout this entire multi-chapter long duel to the death. Magnificent. This word speaks volumes. This fight is probably the best fight in the entire series, hands down. The choreography, the intensity, the sheer force of will, and Garfield's character progression is all masterful. This is a top 5 moment of the entire arc for sure. So after these two amazing chapters, we get 4 chapters of Liliana focus. This was the most fucked up pacing decision I've ever seen. It probably would have been more entertaining to read 4 chapters of Roswaal's morning routine. Now, I don't dislike Liliana as much as most people do. Her design sucks and she's kind of annoying, but whatever. I watch My Hero Academia. This was a surprising drag, cramped between multiple chapters of greatness. The worst pacing of the entire arc, and it felt like a slap in the face. Pristella has to see a chiropractor after doing so much carrying, and I'm grateful this was cut from the light novel. It did have some decent moments though, so of course I won't just gloss over the entire Liliana POV section. Now, ironically, it almost feels like Priscilla is what Regulus wishes he was. A divine existence, somebody born into excellence, has actual clout, and does not entirely lack compassion. She feels for people just in her own strange, fucked up way. I also thought Liliana's inner monologue about the world being constructed by music was kinda cool, and the world building of the occupation of Bard was neat. That's about all I have to say for what went down there. Jumping back to the actual good content, we finally see Baten Kaitos rear his ugly head. Otto is also an awesome character. His first introduction was that of a merchant who then proceeded to get Subaru killed, but now he stands as one of the Amelia camp's greatest assets, as he leads an attack against Baten Kaitos. Speaking of Lei, he name-dropped Melee in reference to a dude from the Scales, which was unexpected. Lei name-drops Rem and uses her memories against them, which in an amazing bro moment, Otto, who doesn't even remember who Rem is, feels intense rage on Subaru's behalf. Lei then uses his authority on Felt, and it doesn't work. This is clearly due to her implied lineage as a royal, but it begs the question on how Gluttony's name recognition actually works. How can the power differentiate between false and real names? Felt has gone by this name for years, yet it doesn't consider it to be her real name. Is your name essentially inscribed into your person at birth? Is your name essentially fate? Judged before the decision is even made? Is it another thing Ode Laguna is responsible for? Lei, I believe, states that he is looking for a spirit for this Lewis character, who actually does manifest in this fight, because Lei and Roy were too fucked up. Lewis could not allow them to fall here and pulled them out so that they could fulfill their purpose of giving birth. There's something insane going on with the now 3 Gluttonies. I'm actually excited to see them next, but I assume that won't be until like Arc 7 or something. I wrote a lot of notes for the following chapters. Wilhelm vs Theresia was an experience. The fight calls back to their previous fights, where Wilhelm worked so hard to try and pull her away from the responsibility as the Sword Saint. Now, after all these years, their swords cross paths again, but Wilhelm struggles to keep up and his heart wavers due to Heinkel being on the scene. The name chapter for Theresia is hands down the best of the arc. It's unmatched and possibly one of the best chapters of the entire series, but of course I have yet to read the novel version of Arc 4, so take that with a grain of salt. Theresia had no real interest in the sword despite being an Astrea, and her knowledge of being born with the divine protection of the death god made it so she didn't want to be a swordsman at all. Not only did she reject swordsmanship, but she rejected people. How could she live with herself if her divine protection hurt somebody she cared about? We see that the Astrea family is, not good, forcing children into a life of being child soldiers in case they get some unbelievably fucked up and powerful divine protection, and leaving them no real option but to live this lifestyle. She was forced into a civil war at the age of 14. I wonder if this is why the sword god ended up picking Theresia for the divine protection, because she was different. This chapter also begs the question, what is the sword god? I have two potential theories for this. Number 1, the sword god is a personification of Ode Laguna itself. What would its purpose be though? Why would it take its form in this power? And number 2 is, the sword god is the divine protection, in a very similar state to One for All from My Hero Academia, basically being a sentient power. Or, it's just a divine protection, and that's stupid. Interesting to think about though. It's also no coincidence that the sword god took the divine protection from her when Pandora arrived. The sword god is clearly sentient in some regard, and made the conscious decision that even during the battle against the White Whale, now was the time to transfer the divine protection. Not during her 20 years as a housewife, using the power to make dinner, but right now, during this critical time, without any of the sword gods mocking or laughing. It all comes to an end as Theresia is killed by Reinhard as she dies in Wilhelm's arms. Reinhard is an interesting character. He's very aware that he is essentially a nuclear weapon in humanoid form. This power differential and this family situation has seemingly made him sort of a disconnected person. Even when he faces undead grandmother, it doesn't seem that he feels any strong emotion about it. Has he ever felt strong emotion? Not that I can recall. It's like he's stunted in some regards. He shows basic kindness and empathy, but the most extreme emotional reaction we see from Reinhard is his feelings of inadequacy and thoughts of failure due to that sentiment being hammered into his head from childhood. Now, he's forced to relive his mistake by killing Theresia yet again, but nothing. He's a blank slate. Reinhard also serves as an interesting foil to Subaru. They both share a few similarities. Both hold a broken power, they both feel disconnected from the people around them because of that power, and they both hold this inferiority complex that constantly has them downplaying themselves. The Astrea family drama is by no means solved, and is actually in a worse place than when the arc started, now that Reinhard has also killed the reanimated Theresia. Wilhelm and Heikel feel unnerved by Reinhard's seemingly lack of an emotional reaction to what he had to do. He views the situation entirely logically and moves on, whereas Wilhelm and Heikel cannot let go of the fleeting image of their mother or wife. Reinhard is once again, in his now adult life, forced into isolation due to Theresia's second demise. We finally cut back to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Subaru Natsuki, as he heads for City Hall after an announcement stating that the witch cult has been driven out. As he heads over, he contemplates how he hopes that all of his comrades have succeeded, and struggles with the idea of using return by death in case it all went wrong, as well as because he feels anxious over inheriting another witch factor. In a great sign of progression, however, he thinks back to how he wouldn't have to worry about this issue alone, and that his many companions would help him find a way over this. Oftentimes throughout Arc 5, we have seen Subaru almost re-shoulder the heavy burden that he wishes to not carry, but it all culminates in him finally accepting that he has friends and loved ones at his side. This is then followed by Subaru meeting with Wilhelm, talking about his battle with his wife, in which Wilhelm was about to call Subaru his something. My guess is either due to his frustration with his current familial situation, he was going to tell Subaru that he could be the son he always wanted, or Subaru has become Wilhelm's reason to swing a sword. Interesting to think about. After some more talking around the town, Subaru, Amelia, and Beatrice all head into Sirius's holding cell, as she was the only archbishop captured. Sirius says she is waiting for Betelgeuse' soul to one day come out of Subaru, or perhaps overtake Subaru, which is painted as of course absurd by the narrative and by Subaru's inner monologue, but is it? That scene with Amelia recognizing Betelgeuse' aura during the Regulus fight might paint a different picture. The spirit of Betelgeuse might very well be a real threat. Changing scenes one more time, we find Julius, whose name was also unfortunately lost to Gluttony. It's kind of funny how Julius is now in the position Subaru might have felt like he was in Arc 3. Nobody recognized this supposed knight, or even knows him, including his spirits. We hear the tragic news that many of the citizens of Pristella are still transformed by authority of lust, and Amelia, in a display of her newfound competence, volunteers to put the transformed civilians in a state of suspended death, and has faith in her own abilities. Subaru also has a passing thought of killing lust and seizing her witch factor to change them back. It's like he has subconsciously accepted his role in assembling the witch factors. Anastasia says they might just find answers to Gluttony and Lust's authorities in a faraway desert at Sage Shala's Tower of Pleiades. I assume I don't need to specify how big of a deal it is the tower is named Pleiades. Shala is a distrusting person, and funnily enough that is in line with the astrology reading for the constellation that the star Shala resides in of Scorpius. In Greek mythology, a scorpion was sent by Artemis and Leto to kill Orion, after Orion pledged to kill every animal on Earth. Betelgeuse, when spelled correctly Beetlejuice, is the Hand of Orion. It makes sense that the Scorpion would be watching over somebody we might be able to reasonably infer as Orion's tomb. Winding down towards the end of Arc 5, it definitely followed up in a lot of ways to be the tragic arc that I had expected it to be in hindsight. Julius and many others were eaten by Gluttony, many people in the evacuation centers ended up dead from Wrath's authority, and a lot of people are grievously wounded, while many innocents are suspended in a death-like state due to lust. I would have appreciated some more heavy consequences overall, but at the same time, this is supposed to be Subaru's first triumph without relying on return by death, so I can understand why this arc wasn't a total disaster. Amelia gets her new puck crystal, and Subaru decides to go see the sage Shala, much to the dismay of Otto and Beatrice. I'm pretty hyped to hear that Julius will be going with them, as I think that Subaru and Julius have a really strong dynamic that will definitely get even more fleshed out in Arc 6. Subaru pretty much immediately downplays his own massive contribution to the war effort, and we learn that Reinhard was basically born with what is the equivalent of a heavenly restriction from Jujutsu Kaisen. Not including the interlude, which were very cute by the way, but I won't say much more about them. The arc ends with the conversation between Subaru and Anastasia, or should I say, Echidna. Aridna essentially claims that she is using the opportunity to talk to the sage to find out how to unbody Jack Anastasia, and we get massive distrust and tension before coming to a tenuous agreement between the two. The arc ends as Amelia, Beatrice, Subaru, Julius, and Aridna leave Pristella for the Roswell mansion once more. What a great arc. Nearly everything about this was fantastic, minus some big pacing issues. If I had to rank them, I would rank it as Arc 4, Arc 3, Arc 5, Arc 2, and then Arc 1. I had a really great time, and let's see what the light novel does differently. There's new dialogue added in which Capella tries to get Al to leak out some of his secrets. Capella seems to think that Al was behind the opening of the floodgate, and also hints that he was behind the murder of the members of the Council of 10. After the building collapses during the fight against Capella, the scene in which Al confronts Anastasia still takes place. However, since they weren't introduced to the artificial spirit Aridna, Al doesn't know what is possessing her. He just knows that she isn't Anastasia Hoshi. Al is the one who gives Betty the magical stones, not Kiritaka, and simply says, "Don't ask," which prompts Subaru to kind of distrust Al. In the light novel, Leia actually does get hit by the Meteor, and it does immense damage. If Lewis didn't intervene, Leia was going to die. Also in the novel, Leia needs to say the full name to eat it now, and not just the first name. Let's talk about the things I liked and disliked about this phase. Al is an insanely interesting character who I want to see more and more of. Garfield's conclusion in his fight was, in one word, magnificent. The Theresia chapter was possibly one of the best chapters of the series. The Estrella family drama is a very interesting plotline, and I'm looking forward to more, and this was an all-around great conclusion, and I don't really have that many complaints about it. Unfortunately, the pacing was, as usual for these phases, pretty all over the place, and Liliana is not interesting enough to have one, let alone 4 chapters dedicated to her, but this was already destroyed in the light novel. And finally, what everyone waits for, let's talk about expectations. Number 1, Subaru will fall pretty far mentally. No, that didn't happen. But I'm doubling down, baby. Arc 6 will be his undoing. The cool Subaru action scene, nope, didn't happen. He's forever a nerd. That's okay, though. That's just how he is. Garfield's mother's memories are with Gluttony. There's still no updates on that. Arc 5 will be a tragic arc. Yeah, we definitely ended this arc off in a not-so-great state. There is a traitor. No updates on this one yet, but the longer this goes, the more I'll mark it off. There's something much deeper going on with Al. Yeah, that is definitely true, especially with the LN changes taking this into account. Yeah, there's something weird going on with him. I'm not going to mark it off entirely yet because we don't know precisely what's going on, but he's not normal, okay? He's not normal. The possibility of Subaru being isekai to assemble all the witch factors, no updates on this, and it's just a theory, and there are a lot of new expectations I'll be throwing up on the board for Arc 6 as well. No prisoner in fiction ever stays in prison. Sirius will escape. Betelgeuse's spirit is inside of Subaru, and that is a problem. Shala will not take much convincing. The fact that it's called the Pleiades Watchtower makes me think that Subaru was meant for this. Fox Echidna or Aridna will lead to a multitude of problems in Arc 6. We will learn much more about the people that come from beyond the Great Waterfall. Melia is name dropped in Arc 5 for a reason, and I think that she will be present in Arc 6. We will probably get a resolution on the Dragon's Blood stuff as Subaru and Krush still have the dragon juice inside of them. And that is all for Arc 5. Let's get into Arc 6. Thank you so much to everyone who stuck around for the entirety of Arc 5. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me with the algorithm. And if you want to see more stuff like this, you can join my Discord down below. I live blog my thoughts as I'm reading. I'm already a couple of chapters into Arc 6, and I have been posting my thoughts as I go, so please do make sure you join. You can also follow me on Twitter. I don't tweet about ReZero yet because I don't want to get spoiled about anything, so I'm not participating in ReZero Twitter, but eventually I will. So if you want to follow for that, please do follow, and that's about it. Thank you so much. See ya.